So today, we're going to talk about Japanese sentence particles. And this is a special request from Gab. What's up, Gab? He's been a student of mine for about a year now, but, a lot of people also ask me to kind of teach them how this works, so we're going to get into that today. But, it's not going to be exactly what you expect it to be. These headphones are really making me sweat. Great quality, not for this weather right now. So, if you're gonna ask what happened to that, I'm putting it down. Okay, so regarding sentence particles, I've actually lectured about this several times over the year. I've actually had a guide for it, I've even had a cheat sheet, and I've had to keep revising this cheat sheet continuously. Every time I had new information, and it kind of removed the prior information, which I thought was correct, but doesn't make sense later on. So, we're actually not going to do that. I'm not going to give you a lecture on the sentence particles per se. If you want something like that, you can Google it. Just Google Japanese sentence particles. You're going to find all of this information on how they work. Or if you have a book, it's probably going to be all there anyway, so you won't need to really ask me about how the sentence particles work. Instead, we're gonna do a slight pivot, even though I know you're expecting sentence particles. We're gonna talk about it, but we're gonna talk about why you keep forgetting your sentence particles and why you keep getting the wrong answers whenever you're trying to form a sentence. So what does this mean? So most of the sentence particles that you're gonna read up, you can get a cheat sheet, look it up on the internet, whatever. These are going to explain the sentence particles from the point of view of your native language. So let's take, for example, English. In English, let's bring up wa. Actually, this is read as ha. I should probably get into that. If you're a complete beginner, the ha, which you read in katakana, it's ha, if it's a word in hiragana. However, it also functions as a topic marker. This is not common in English sentences. As a topic marker, the ha is now read as a wa, and it identifies the topic. Topic markers are a little alien in the English language, because you don't start an English sentence with, say, oh, the topic of this is a bird. So that's the bird, and regarding this bird, if you look through the sentence particles, you'll know what I'm talking about. Just Google it. Very easy to do. But what I mean by this is the very essence of topic markers themselves. If you're learning it from a English point of view, then you kind of understand the rules. But not really. I'd like to refer you back to some of my beginning videos talking about why this is not a good idea. So if you're relying mostly on the English explanation read through textbooks on how these grammatical functions work, you're just going to get very confused. For example, the most common misconception of wa is that it symbolizes something like is or am. So if I give the sentence, watashi wa Nate-san desu, you think it's I am Nathan. But that's not really how it functions, because that is a subject marker. That's ga, not wa. What wa actually functions as is closer to regarding me, I am Nathan. Again, you can look this up on some cheat sheet or some other website that explains what subject and topic markers are. But that's a common misconception that most people make. So why does this happen? I'm gonna go back and refer you to my previous video, and it's the same thing. You need a lot more information and input in your target language. So now you might be asking, how then do I learn these particles? Not that hard. You simply need a reference book or a cheat sheet, or if you have the Minna no Nihongo series, as you are aware, there is the Bain book, which is written in Japanese, and there is the English translation notes. You can simply look up the English translation notes because they actually contain all of the information you need regarding how to use the sentence particles and how the sentence is functioning, and then refer to your main grammatical textbook. So why do I even like Minna no Nihongo? It's because I don't use it one-to-one. I don't read them at the same time, looking through the main textbook and the English guide at the same time. The English reference book, or the English translation notes, I use primarily as a reference or a guide. It's not something I read while looking at the Japanese sentence. And I like that there is an independent textbook which I can read in Japanese in native content. And only when I don't know what's happening do I bring up the English translation notes. How does this relate to Japanese sentence particles? Very easy. You have to read a lot of native content sentences, a lot of native content books, or, I don't know, apps, some of these games that use some basic games in super basic Japanese. And when you read them, you should have a reference book handy, or again, you can just have the cheat sheet. And so you can look at this cheat sheet and you can say, okay, so that is marking this topic, this subject, and the sentence means this. Okay. But then again, refer back to my earlier videos and always be aware that this is it's more of an approximation of what the sentence really means. So again, you want to get rid of the English mindset of how the sentence works, because that's an approximation of what the translation is. It's not really how it works. So, go back to some of my former videos and I discuss how this works. So this is actually the proper way of how you learn sentence particles. It's through continuous exposure and continuous usage. A metaphor for this is, say you're playing a video game. You don't get good at a video game by reading walkthroughs and looking at how-to videos. You get good at the video game by playing the video game. And that is exactly the same thing here. You're not going to learn the sentence particles just by continuously looking at the cheat sheet or by listening to lectures on how these sentence particles work. Are they useful? Yes. Just like a walkthrough is useful in video games. But you need to actually do it if you want to pass that video game, and in this case, if you want to learn the sentence particles. You need to read, and you need to immerse yourself in the content. So I know that kind of felt like a bait and switch to you, but honestly, this is one of the things that never gets brought up when you're studying sentence particles in Japanese. Again, if you want the information on how to get sentence particles, you can easily find it on Google. There are even some very helpful YouTube videos that will teach you exactly what you want to know. I do recommend that you always remember that this is not the exact meaning that the sentence is actually trying to convey. As you learn more about the language, the more you will realize that the current rules and the current lectures that are valid right now are no longer valid as you go further in. For example, wa, which I just said is a topic marker. So right now okay, it's a topic marker, it's also read as ha, but at a certain point, there are some sentences, like for example, onomai wa, which is asking, oh, what's your name? But it ends with a wa. If you're a beginner, okay, isn't that supposed to end with a ka? Why is it wa? Things like this, which you'll only understand as you get more information and you get more content in the native language. So what is the point I'm trying to make here? You should use sentence particle lectures and notes as a reference, not as a rule. You need to get the native content with this as reference and just simply focus more on getting more input in the target language content, in this case, Japanese. You need more Japanese input, you need more information on how the language works, and only use the knowledge or the lectures for how sentence particles works as a reference, not as your main rule and guide. So I was thinking of saving this for another lesson or another lecture, But since this video was a special request from Gab, I wanted to just bring up the fact why he is having a hard time, and probably why most of you might be having a hard time studying and learning these sentence particles. And I think one of the biggest problems is the reference materials that you are using. In this case, your books, Gab. Now, I know it is a very useful book. It is actually even written in native language. It's written by native speakers. However, the target of your book is for people taking the N5. And as you've already stated, you have no interest in taking the N5. You can see why you're having a hard time using this book to learn the language. This is actually why I always recommend the Mi no Nihongo series. Just because the main textbook is entirely in Japanese, so you're not distracted by English words and English sentences, which forces you to shift between your two languages, your target and your native language. And there is an English translation notes, which you only open when you don't know what's happening, as compared to something like Genki, which is primarily in English and then teaches you how to learn Japanese, which is something I always say does not work. So I think that might be the topic of my next video, how to properly self-study using textbooks. And I'd like to apologize because I know most of you guys were expecting a sentence particle lecture. But I feel that this particular lesson is what is not covered by most of those other videos and articles on how to learn sentence particles. And again, I really have to emphasize that you have to immerse while using it as a guide. Because a lot of these other lectures and other videos which are going to tell you how to do it will only be valid at the start, but as you pick up more of the language and comprehend more of the language, it starts to blur the lines. And if you're still focused on thinking in your native language instead of your target language, it'll just keep confusing you. So that's the summary and the important thing that I want to point out. So that's it for this week. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe, to hit the like button. Hell, hit the dislike button. If you want, whatever. The Patreon's open, and if you have other suggestions or you'd like to discuss other things regarding how to learn Japanese or other languages, even though I just started in Korean a few weeks ago, then please leave a comment down below. And I'll see you next week.